Good evening, and welcome to our Founders Forum this evening. My name is Aaron Baker. I work here at the City of Mesquite in the Planning Department. I'm a representative from the Virgin Valley Historical Committee. I'd like to welcome you for our Founders Forum. And this evening we have a really special treat for you. A couple of different things going on this evening. We have some committee members who have served on the committee, and we want to express our appreciation to them with a certificate. We also have some students who have competed in an essay contest as part of Mesquite Days. The essay was entitled My Roots, and students were supposed to explore where their roots are from and how they got planted here in the Virgin Valley. And there were some fantastic entries, and you'll actually get to hear our first place winner. So that should be a great experience there. Our guests after that will have a Founders Forum in a traditional format. We'll have longtime residents Sam, Reber, and Darlene Reese. They will share some of their memories growing up here in Mesquite. But first, I wanted to get going with a certificate of appreciation for Mary Ann Levitt, if you could come up. We also have one for Dennis Tragle, who also had served on the committee, but we wanted to present Mary Ann with her certificate of appreciation. Mary Ann has been our Bunkerville representative and has shared her insights from that area over there. So we appreciate Mary Ann very much. Thank you. All right. We also have, now as part of the essay contest, like I said, students from Virgin Valley High School and from Beaver Dam High School were eligible to compete in the essay contest. And we had a number of honorable mentions. And I'll be honest, I received a number of phone calls today from students saying, oh, I have to work, or I can't make it tonight. So not all of them are here this evening, but if you are here, would you please come up and we can present you with your certificate. Marisol Sanchez. Hey. If you just want to stay up here for a minute. Stay up here for a minute. We'll get all of them up here. Okay, there's Joni. Okay, she's not here, I guess. Jordi Espinoza. Yeah, I guess he's not. Brian Sebastian. No go. Colton Bullock. He called me. Crystal Gonzalez. Not here either. John Paul Santos. He's not here either. Adam Pellington. I know he's here. I saw him in the back. Well, here you go, Adam. Way to go. Audrey Evans. Go. Wyatt Robinson isn't here, and Sylvia Cortez. All right. Well, for these three, let's hear another round of applause. These students wrote fantastic essays. They're very interesting to read. We had a panel of 4 judges. We had Susan Bennett, David Bly, Mary Ann Levitt, and myself grade these, and we graded these independently, and these came out on top. So thank you. Good job. Now to our top 3. In conjunction with this, the Desert Valley Times helped sponsor this as well, and they were very generous. We were able to come up with some prizes from the City of Mesquite and from the Desert Valley Times. So we're first going to award our 3rd place winner, Sadie Levitt. Come on up, Sadie. We're going to present Sadie with her certificate. And by the way, these certificates are signed by the editor and general manager of the Desert Valley Times, David Bly, and by Mayor Susan Holacek. And here is a check for Sadie that she has earned for doing a great job. Why don't we have you stay up here, Sadie, with your large check and certificate? Okay, why don't we have Carlos Gomez come on up. He's our 2nd place winner. Carlos wrote a great essay, and here is your $60 check, Carlos. You'll be a wealthy man, and here's your certificate. And then we have our 1st place winner, Tyler Baeza. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Why don't you come on down? Now, I should say Sadie is from Bunkerville, and she's a student at Virgin Valley. Carlos is from Mesquite, and he's a student at Virgin Valley. And Tyler is a student out of Beaver Dam. And Tyler, our grand prize winner, gets $100. So now let me give the certificate to Tyler. Let's have her hear another round of applause for these students. Now, you probably want to read their essays, and the Desert Valley Times has agreed to publish their essays in the coming weeks. You'll be able to read each of theirs and see their experiences, how they ended up here in the Virgin Valley. So, thank you. Now, Tyler, don't sit down quite yet, Tyler. Do you need to go get your essay? Tyler also gets the great privilege of reading his essay to us this evening. So, he has prepared well, I assume.
My roots. I've come from views of red mesas and green fields and pastures. I'm from my grandma's house next door to the church, where you can see everyone up and down the street. I'm from the sagebrush, apricot trees, and pomegranates. I'm from Dutch oven chicken and potatoes. Storytelling from the Levitts, the Bullers, my great-greats. I'm from the hard-working ethic of the pioneers who made something from nothing. From cattle drives through the middle of town and swimming in the big ditch. I'm from church on Sunday right down the street. I'm from Bunkerville, Mesquite, and Gunlock. I'm from homemade bread and homegrown tomatoes. I'm from the musicians of a family band, from the growers of fields of melons, and the courage and perseverance of the early settlers. I'm from a heritage rich in tradition and example. This poem describes parts of my life and a little about my roots. I was born here in the Virgin Valley, but my ancestors came from other places, some close by and some an ocean away. Part of my family history can be traced back to those who settled the Virgin Valley. George Hebron Buller, son of legendary James Samuel Page Buller, George H., as he was called, was my great-great-great-grandfather. They traveled down to settle in Mesquite from Gunlock, Utah, in a covered wagon with a milk cow tied behind it. He owned land where the Arvada Gun Club and racetrack is now. He called it the Lone Star Ranch. He raised cattle, pigs, and grew melons. My great-great-grandmother, Bessie, was his oldest daughter, out of 13 children. They were well known for their musical talent and for their family band. Another great-great-great-great-grandfather was Dudley Levitt. He was famous for having many wives and expanding Bunkerville and Mesquite. Almost everyone with relatives here in Mesquite can trace their lineage back to Dudley Levitt. Some of my ancestors in closer generations came from Italy. My great-grandparents farmed for many years in the Virgin Valley. They had a large dairy farm, the largest dairy farm in the state, owned by one man. Their oldest son, who was my grandfather, learned to work hard while farming green fields of alfalfa. I am also descended from Mexican vaqueros. My great-grandfather was well known in Mexico for training horses and for his skill as a cowboy. My dad learned this too and passed it along to me. My family roots are planted deeply here in the Virgin Valley. I'm proud of my ancestors and the foundation that they laid. Their struggles and effort paved the way for Mesquite and the Virgin Valley to be what it is today. I'm sure Grandpa George Buller would be amazed to see that Smith's Food and Drug now stands where his peach orchard once was. He and the other brave men and women that came here have made our valley bloom.
All right. Thank you, Tyler. The thing that Tyler will never tell you about himself, he's too modest to say this, but he's a ninth grader at Beaver Dam. So I think that's a great job for a freshman. I know I wasn't writing that well as a freshman. So. Now we're going to transition into our other part of the program this evening. I'm sure this is the other part that everyone came to see, the Founders Forum. This evening, like I said, we have a great program with Sam Reber and his sister Darlene Reese. And Geraldine Zarate will be our moderator this evening, and she'll be able to tell you a little bit about them and their history. Turn the time over to them.
Welcome. We're just really thrilled to have the group that we have tonight, and we're just really thrilled with the guests that we have. We have tonight brother and sister team, Darlene, Reber, Reese, and Sam Reber, and they're neighbors, and they live close and down on Levitt Lane, which didn't always have a name. It was just down the lane. Where were you guys born? Sam, where were you born?
I was born in St. George, Utah, and then raised here.
Yeah. Darlene, did you go in St. George too? Were you born there? Okay. Well, we all were before the hospital, except that short time when we had a doctor here. Who were your parents? Sam, tell us who your parents were.
Ralston Reber and Myrtle Jensen Reber.
Okay. And who were your grandparents?
Christina Jensen, she was an abbot. William E. Abbott's daughter. And then John Jensen was her husband, my mother's parents. And on my dad's side, it was Mary Jane Entz Reber and Sammy Reber. Right.
Sam and Darlene share a great-grandmother with me, Margaret Bodile Jensen Johnson. So we are related, like almost everybody is in some way or the other. Okay, the Rebers we know were very industrious, hard-working farmers, but they farmed something in particular. What was that, Sam?
Well, they belonged to the grape co-op, and they raised Thompson seedless grapes and made raisins out of them.
Was the co-op a local group here?
Yes, there were some Waits, Toblers, Jensens. Down where Grapevine Villa is, that was part of our farm, my dad's farm. My granddad's farm was just above that.
And was it only Thompson that you grew?
Well, I'm sure they raised other kinds, but they...
Thompsons do so well here.
It's a sweet grape, but it's a smaller grape, but they made real good raisins.
Tell me about the co-op. Was it an effort to ship as a group?
In those days in Mesquite, there wasn't much industry, and so they were industrious people, and they had an egg co-op, they had a grape co-op. Later on, they had a dairy association, and kind of created their own industries here. And
when they picked the grapes, and it went through the whole process then, right? I mean, that was...
Yes, and then they dry them. They had a stemmer. In fact, I think the stemmer is over in the museum that my grandparents had. And they would take grapes, raisins after they dried them, and bag them, and they'd take pomegranates, anything they raised that they could trade, and they'd go peddling up through Utah, and then they'd go, like Silver Reef was a mining town, and they'd go over to Panaca and Goat, and trade, like if an enterprise, they'd trade raisins for squash.
About when was this? About the years?
Well, it would have been in the early 1900s, late 1800s.
And so they made pretty good living out of that, did they?
Yeah, they farmed, and they raised a lot of gardens, and about everything they ate, they had to raise. I read a story the other day about my great-grandfather, who came over from Switzerland and was sent down to Santa Clara, and he walked with 100 pounds of wheat from Santa Clara to the mill in Washington. And the deal was that he thought if he could get over there and make flour out of it, they charged him 10% of what they had. So he thought, well, it'll be easy coming back with 90 pounds of flour compared to 100 going over. But the deal is that they said anybody that could walk that far with 100 pounds of grain deserves to have it all. So he packed 100 pounds back. They also walked from Santa Clara to St. George when they built the temple. He'd walk over in the morning, work all day, and then walk home. That was my great-granddad.
And this is the Rebers, right?
Yes.
And you said they were Swiss.
West,
Right, right. And so why did your family come down here?
Well, my great-granddad, his first wife passed away, and they had several children, and he went up to Pioche and married his brother's wife, who had died. His brother had died, and he talked her into marrying, and then they raised a family. And anyway, between those families, the kids grew up, and they had to have a little more room and a little more ground, and so they actually migrated down to Littlefield. And my grandparents, they were raised in Santa Clara. That was my great-granddad. And then my granddad, by the way, my name is Samuel Alvin Reber, and my granddad and great-granddad was also Samuel. Samuel Sr. and Samuel Jr., and then me. I'm the little guy. But anyway, they needed more room and more land to farm and make a living, and so the kids, as they came along, got old enough, they'd spread out, come on down the river. My dad was actually born in 1903 in Bunkerville, in a Little Rock house.
But did they stay, then they were back in Littlefield, I mean, at that time?
Well, they
stayed?
Actually, what happened, they lived in Beaver Dams near Littlefield, and a big flood came and washed their house away. And so then they came down to Bunkerville and built a rock house. And that's where my dad was born.
Well, this house that washed away,
It was a lumber house, and they actually pulled the shed off from it and pulled it on skids with a team all the way from Littlefield down the river bottom to the place where they lived. And they before they built their home, they lived in that, and they had a little lean-to on the side, and the kids slept in it. That's my granddad.
So they pulled a house all the way from Littlefield through that sand.
Back in those days, the river was clear. There was no tamarack. And when the floods would come, it would be roaring down through here, and nothing holding it back. And there was a lot of sandbars, and skidding a little old lumber house.
Well, it seemed like the flood just could have brought it down for them.
Well, that was the only thing that was left after the flood. They pulled it up on the hill and saved that. But it was a tough time in those days. Can you imagine living out here on the street on a dirt farm? Farm was all sand dunes, and they had to level it. Their transportation was horses and buggy. My dad told me a story about a guy by the name of Vi Hancock. Some of the older people here that was raised here might remember him. But he was about 6'2" and a tall, slender guy. And the first car that came to town, there's a bunch of guys got together, and they bet that Vi Hancock could beat the car to St. George. And of course, the road was up the river bottom, and they had to cross the river about 10 or 12 times before they got to Beaver Dams, and then go up the old Utah Hill. There was no road, it was a wagon road is what it was, and this old car didn't go very fast. And so they had a bet, and Vi Hancock took off right here in Main Street, went right up over the mountain, down through Bloomington and into St. George, and the car beat him by 30 minutes. Now that's how slow the traffic was in those days.
Well, Darlene, what can you tell us about your grandparents? Tell me about your Reber grandparents.
I don't remember my grandfather because he died when I was a year old.
And then what did your grandmother do?
He had the farm, and their farm is right there where the American First Credit Union is, beside the vacant lot. That's where my grandparents' house was, and their farm was down below that. And Grandma stayed on the farm. The boys were still there. Uncle Irie had helped her some, but my dad and my brothers helped a lot. And Grandma had the little farm. And turns, my brothers and cousins, and staying with my grandmother at night so that we could help her with the chores and watch out after her a little bit. And the little woman seemed like had beautiful long gray hair that she used to, I loved to watch, ended up twisted around her head and put her long bone liked to be there. She was very kind. Most of the things that my grandmother left, other than the house that they tore down, which was very hard to watch your house go down, but over at the museum, you'll see a lot of things. You'll see the pictures of our grandparents, our great-grandparents.
Yeah, there are. We've been
The
grateful.
little
at the
glass
museum,
case
yeah.
that my aunt gave most of the things there.
And so
all
you
hers.
kids took turns going up and staying with your grandmother up there to kind of help, because
Yeah.
there would have been a lot of work. Sam, you told me a story that here's a little farm boy come up from this quiet street road.
We lived down at the other end of town, and in those days, the Main Street went down about where Riverside Drive is, and made a big circle, and of course went over through Bunkerville and out and down around Riverside. And we were way below there, our home, and so when we'd go up, I stayed with my grandmother my fourth year in elementary school, the fourth grade and the fifth grade during the winter. And it was hard for me to get used to the trucks making all the noise when they'd go by the house. It took me 3-4 nights to get used to that noise. But I'd help chop the wood and feed the pigs and milk the cow and whatever the chores they had to do. And my grandmother was real industrious. She would make homemade soap. I helped her several times to make homemade soap. They'd butcher a couple of pigs in the fall. They'd cure the hams and the bacons. And I can remember a lot of times they'd take a 55-gallon drum, put a gunny sack over the top with a bar, and hang the hams and the bacon down, and they had a little fire underneath. And we'd stoke the fire all day, and it'd smoke up through the sack. And then at night, we'd take and wrap it up in a cloth, like a sheet, and put it in the old lumber house that used to be their home, and it was cool. And they'd put it in a box, and then they'd salt it down, and it made real good salt pork. And she had a lot of home remedies too. I can remember one time, my dad ran the canal, and they went up, and he stopped by my grandmother's place and asked me to go up with him to get a plug out of one of the head gates at the main canal. As we dropped down over the hill on a trail, he had a pitchfork over his back shoulder, and he says, "Now whatever you do, stay back a little bit as we go down this trail, so you don't fall into this pitchfork over my head or my shoulder." And I was watching the pitchfork, and I stumbled, and I fell, and my right arm went right over a big cactus bush. You've seen those spikes on those cactus. I had about 50 of them right along there, and we pulled them out and finished the job and came home, and my grandmother said, "I can fix that." She took a bunch of pine gum. You've heard of sticky gum and pine gum off the juniper trees? And she just plastered that arm, wrapped it with a rag, and the next morning when she took it off, as she pulled it out, all those little pieces and all that poison that had gone into my arm came out. And just a couple of days, I was back in school writing with my right hand. But anyway, he had mustard plasters. I can remember if I got a cold, boy, I hated those mustard plasters on my chest. She had a lot of home remedies that really worked. In those days, the water wasn't very good in Mesquite. In fact, they had a cistern, and they'd run the water from the ditch in the fall, or in the spring when it was clear, into the cistern, and then we'd drink out of the cistern. We'd draw the water up, and anyway, because the water was so bad, every time we'd get a cold or something, she'd force hot tea. She said, that's the best remedy there is for a cold. And so I drank a lot of hot tea, and I always hated it because she wouldn't put any sugar in it or any honey. And that was just one of the home remedies that she had.
Darlene, okay, now tell us about your parents. Your parents, now that we've learned that you did live down the lane, or it's always the lane, it's always the lane to me, but down there. How did they meet, and who were they?
Well, Dad like I said, lived there on Main Street. That's where they lived. And my dad was 10 years older than my mom. And that he always said that he waited for her to grow up. He had seen her when she was 10, and he thought she was 2. That's what he said. Anyway, they always had to walk to church. Of course, they went to church uptown, and one day coming home from church, my dad kind of waited for my mom to catch up. And that's how they started going together. As they walked home from church together. And Dad always told about going down and staying at Grandma's because he thought Grandma really liked him. Thought that he'd go visit a lot.
This is the Grandma.
Grandma Jensen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Grandma's house is still there. It's on Riverside Road, and it's the little white one that Valerie Jensen lives in. House down, I think. They had their farm there. My mother was 19 when they got married, and my dad was like 3 days being 30. Anyway, that's how they met. Dad farmed. When they were first married, they stayed with my grandparents, our grandparents, for a year or so. Lived with them, I think, until my oldest brother was born. And then they lived in a little 2-room lumber house that's right there where that trailer house is by the post, right there between Kelly's house. Lumber house there. It had 2 rooms. One they used for the bedroom, and the other in the kitchen. And then they had on the backs of their houses, they always had like a grape arbor porch because it was cool. Helped a little bit. And for their water, they would take a barrel and fill it sometimes and wrap gunny sacks around to keep it wet. That under. They lived there until I was 3.
Okay, and that's then when they moved in the house.
That's when we moved down to the house now that's still there.
So you kids grew up down on that quiet street that Sam just didn't know that there were big trucks going by other places.
Right.
So
And
what was it like growing up on that? I mean, you must have. Did you have to walk to school? Did the school bus come down and pick you up down at your house?
School bus picked us up. Right. My mother always had to walk. Sometimes she even said they would even walk.
I thought the school bus would have stopped about up the. Did it have the way to turn around?
It didn't go clear down to our house.
Oh, we
had to walk up about to where Smoky Lane goes across. Elementary school in Mesquite, and then high school in Bunkerville. It was fun down there. There were sand hills all down, where Sunset Green is. There were all sand hills. Played sand hills. Did a lot of night games and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet you kids had to help out on the farm there.
We did. And our dad would always sing. We always had to go down the rows. Dad would put us at the top of the row to go down and pull weeds in the spring when he'd plant, and he'd always sing to us so that maybe we'd stay there. And one that he always used to sing to us was "Saw My Leg Off." Oh, saw my leg off. Remember that one? So I can't go home. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm gonna eat more.
Yes, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, we used to sing that, and Dad loved to sing. "You Are My Sunshine." He would entertain us to try and make us happy while we pulled weeds.
So Sam, were you helping out on the farm too then?
Yes.
And you've ended up working. You've ended up a farmer. Did you not decide that was what you didn't want to do, or?
We were raised on a dairy farm, and when I was real young, we milked the cows by hand. My older brothers, my dad and mother would milk the cows.
About how many cows?
Well, we started out with about 6 or 8 cows, milk cows, and we'd put the milk, we'd strain it and put it in a can, and then Max Hafen had a water box that was a cooler box, and we'd about every other day we'd take the cans up to his place and put it in this cooler box, and then the milk truck would come and pick them up. 10-gallon cans. But we'd haul them up there in a wagon and a team. I milked cows. When I went to high school, I started milking. We had machines by then, and I started milking when I was about the 8th grade. And I'd have to milk by then we were milking around 25 or 30 cows.
And that's morning and night.
Morning and night. And I'd milk them in the morning, and my brother would milk them at night, my younger brother. And I'd get up about 3:30, 4 o'clock and milk the cows and then go to school. And I swore up and down when I got out of high school that I'd never milk another cow. But I went to the University of Nevada. My younger brother then took over milking night and morning. And I was in an economic class, and a professor came in one morning and he said, "Do any of you guys know how to milk cows?" And I made the mistake of raising my hand. And I just got married, and I needed a job. So I thought, well, you know, that might not be too bad. Work for the university and milk a few cows before I went to school. And then at that time, we milked around 60 cows. And so I'd get up in the morning and milk the cows and then go to school. Needless to say, I didn't stay in school very long because I hated to milk cows. But I came back and went into business with my dad, and we went from around 40 cows to over 100 cows, and we milked them for several years, then we sold out to our neighbor.
Now, we haven't talked about your siblings. How big a family, and who are they? And
There's 7 of us. 7 children. We have an older brother named Dennis, and he lives in Sutherland, Oregon. Reber. And I have a brother, Glendon, who lives in California. He had enough of farming. He went down to make millions at California. And then there's myself. I married Kenley, and we kind of stayed here. And Sam. I have a brother, Grant, and a sister, Mary, and a sister, Helen. That's our family.
so the two of you, out of your siblings, you've decided that you like Mesquite. Tell me about that. Why have you stayed in Mesquite? Why have you stuck around? I know that both of you have kind of gone at different times, but you know, here you are. We're blessed with you.
Well, I don't know how blessed you are, but anyway, Kenley was from Mount Carmel, Utah, and we lived there when we were first married for 3 years, and then we came back to Mesquite. And Kenley had always wanted to go to school, so he milked cows for Hafen Dairy for about 8 years, and took some classes from Utah State University, and so then we decided that we would take our family and go to college. Logan and went to college, and then we went to, when he graduated as an English teacher, we went to Montpelier, Idaho, and decided it was so cold that year that if we didn't, there was a fellow there, and he said he'd always wanted to leave Montpelier, but he could never get enough money ahead. And that first year of teaching, we could understand that, so we decided if we didn't leave Montpelier, then we wanted to come back, because Kenley's mother was a widow, and my mom and dad, my dad wasn't doing really well at the time. Anyway, we wanted to be closer to our parents, and so we bought a piece of ground next to Dad and Mom, and that's where we stayed. And I don't think there's a better place on earth.
You've seen a lot of changes down that lane, though, haven't you?
A few.
Now there's traffic.
Yeah, now there's lots of traffic.
And Sam, what about you? I remember holding a grudge against you because you stole one of our favorite teachers, and I didn't think we were ever going to get her back, but we did.
Well, I'd tell some stories, but we're on TV, so I guess we better not. But anyway, and my wife's in the audience. I study agriculture, and so I came back and went into business with my dad. And none of my brothers wanted to farm. My younger brother had asthma, and my older brothers had left and gone off and made their millions. And I got stuck here with a farm and raised their kids. our family here. My wife came to teach, and you know, back in those days, there was only 25 kids in my class going all through school, and most classes just had 25 kids. It was about 12 girls and 12 boys, and I started to look at girls about the 10th or 11th grade, and I asked my mother, I said, can I date this girl or that girl? And she says, no, no. I named all the girls around my age, and I was either first, second, or third cousin to every one of them. So when my wife came to town, she was from Idaho, and I didn't let her leave. We got married. But anyway, it was great. You know, believe it or not, that lane was called Pulsfer Lane because your granddad had a farm at the bottom, and he lived at the top. And it was Pulsfer Lane for a long time. We just, like she said, we just called it the lane. It was a dirt road. But then when they oiled it, the Levitts lived on the corner, and so it's Levitt Lane from there on down to Sunset Greens. But from Levitt's home up to the main street, it's Pulsfer Lane. So anyway, they just got a double name. But we enjoyed living here. My wife taught school, and I farmed. I worked. I had a ranch up. We had a ranch up at Beaver Dams, and farmed that for a while. And then my mother and I sold that after my dad passed away. And then we still had 50 acres here in town, and I farmed that. But I realized that when we sold the dairy, I had to do something besides farm because I didn't have enough ground. And so I started working in 1971 for Clark County Parks and Recreation. And I maintained the park up here and the cemetery for 13 years before Mesquite Incorporated. And they asked me if I'd stay and be the public works director, and there's only 3 of us working for the county. But I had 13 years in with the county, and I asked them what the salary would be, and of course they were just incorporated. And they got together and they said, well, we'd have to cut your pay. And I said, well, thanks, but no thanks. And so I stayed with the county, and I ended up working in Las Vegas for 1 year. Then I transferred out to Overton and worked there for 2.5 years. Then they asked me to go up to the fairgrounds in Logandale, and I helped them build the fairgrounds. I was over all the maintenance at the fairgrounds for 10.5 years before I retired. I retired in 1997, I guess it was. I was 55 years old from the county.
Well, both of you have been such hard workers and came from a family of really hard workers. I know that you both grew up just really having a lot of responsibilities, but Darlene told me there still were fun times. What did you do when you were kids down on that quiet lane and when you wanted to have fun? What were some of the things you did?
Well, we had a few neighbors. Uncle Melbourne and his family lived down across the street in the Levitt. They had family in fact, there were 2 Levitt families. And so there were quite a few of us, and we'd get together at night and play kick the can and hide and seek. And we didn't play Green Ghost then, but that's what our kids played. Always running around. They loved to play Green Ghost. And I guess that's one thing that I miss, is the fun that we had. Even though we worked hard, it seemed like that the people were happy. In the community, there was always dancing. Everybody went to dances. My dad used to tell a story about Grandma Abbott, Mary Jane Abbott, that you see out on the statue out here. She was just a little woman and really vivacious. And he used to tell us about how she would dance. She would privy at the corners. Dad used to laugh about Grandma because she just loved to dance. And there was a lot of them. They were great dancers and always did that.
Gee, and you didn't even have TV.
No, we didn't have TV.
When TV came in the valley, did your family get one?
No, we didn't have a TV until after Kinley night. Well, we had kids. Yeah, we didn't have power down where we did as soon as they did uptown. We didn't have telephones. We lived in the country.
Where did you go when you needed to make a call?
I worked at the phone company right at first.
That's what I was going to say. You probably went
When
up
I
to
was
my
a
grandparents.
teenager. Yeah, I worked at the phone company for a little while when it was there in that little wooden building right there where it is now, and then when it was in house.
Did you ever listen in on calls?
Not that I remember. Where the Casablanca is now, there was a family, the Jensen family, lived there, Dale and Beth, Mary Ellen, and she played the horn and I played the horn. So when we wanted to get a hold of each other, we would go out and blare on our horn, so that we could. That was our communication. We didn't talk on the phone. We didn't have a phone, but we didn't miss the. I don't know. I guess.
Apparently, it wasn't that important to be connected.
I know that the kids uptown, whenever we want to have a party, I'd say, well, let's have a party at my house. And they'd say, no, it's too far. So we'll have it at my house. It was closer for me to come uptown than it was for them to come downtown. But anyway.
Sam, what were some of the things that you did when you're...
I was just thinking today, when I was I think I was in the 5th or 6th grade, we had a couple of baseball teams in town, junior leagues or little leagues, and we'd play on a vacant lot, 2 or 3 different places in town. We'd practice. They'd be leveling their ground, and there was no vegetation on it. It was just a dirt field. And the uptown team was called the Hot Shots, and the downtown team, which I was on, was the Holy Sox. And we played 2 or 3 games each summer. And the older kids, college kids, would come home and they'd start a team, and all of us would get together, kids about the same age, and play on it. I can remember ordering my first glove out of Sears and Roebuck, and I was so excited when it came. It cost me $3.50. It was just a regular, nice glove, and we'd have to work it to get a pocket in it. And when we'd shop in those days for school clothes, we'd always order them out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog. And anyway, we had a 4-H club. Darlene was in 4-H. When she was about 14 years old, she won a pie contest and won a trip to Chicago. She's too bashful to tell you about that, but she made beautiful, real good tasting cherry pies, and that's how she won the trip to Chicago.
And a girl from Mesquite went to Chicago. Wow.
Yeah, I was looking at our picture book, our photo book the other day, and ran onto the articles in the newspaper, and I thought, wow.
So you flew on an airplane?
I did, first time in my life. I represented the state of Nevada.
For cherry pies.
Cherry pie. And in Chicago, they had this great big, it was like in a big gymnasium, great big. And they had you had to send in your recipes, and they had all of the things in the center, and then there was a stove for each state. It had your state name on it. Remember how scared I was, almost as nervous as I am tonight. But anyway, I was so busy and doing it, and the photographers were going around, and they said, Nevada, smile a little. But it was quite a trip. It was scary, but it was interesting. And I learned that Chicago has black snow instead of white. I'd never seen black snow.
Did that change your life any? Did you? I mean, when you saw, gee, it was a big world out there coming from Mesquite.
I just remember, I think the farthest I'd ever been was to like Las Vegas, because like in 4-H, that's where I learned to sew. Started when I was 10, so I learned that. And we used to have fashion shows in Las Vegas at the old Thunderbird Hotel. And I think that was probably the farthest. I know, well, I went to Salt Lake when I was 14.
Now, who's this back to this cherry pie?
Oh.
That sounds so good. Was it your mom who taught you how to bake it? I mean, where did this come from?
Actually, I took lessons from Bertha Howe on making my...
Bertha Howe.
On making cherry pie, and she helped me with the recipe. Taught me how to do the lattice. We had to do the lattice top. My mother was a wonderful pie baker.
And so,
Birth at the
did
top.
you have to go up through the competition through the state?
We did. Went to Reno for the.
Well, there was another
State.
big trip all the way to
Yeah.
Reno.
We went by car though, and it was a long ways. But yeah,
Still
there was.
is.
I think there were five of us competing in this for the state.
Okay, Sam, can you top that?
We had games that we'd play, like you said, in the baseball thing. But in the summertime, we'd go swimming, and there was no swimming pool in town. So we'd go over to the Bunkerville Sandgate, which is just north of the bridge in the canal, and that's where I learned how to swim. My older brother threw me in, and he said, swim or drown. And I'd always been kind of scared of the water since. I can swim, but we would go there, and then I can remember as a teenager over here at the Desert Palms Motel, that was the first cement swimming pool that I swam in, that I knew of that was around. And they'd let us go in there and swim. Cost us a quarter or something, but we'd go to movies. The old Elwood Theater was up here on the corner, and we'd go to Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy and those kind of movies. I can remember in elementary school, we'd see black and white movies that were you'd had to read. They were soundless. That's going back quite a ways, but I never could read very well, so I didn't know quite what was going on in the movie. But when I was like 8 or 10 years old, you know, I did love to see the horses and the cowboys shoot the Indians and stuff like that. We kind of had to make our own games, you know, our own entertainment. Like Darlene said, we didn't have any TV. I can remember just before I graduated from high school, we did get an old black and white TV with the rabbit ears up, and it was blurry, and we used to watch Queen for a Day and some of those.
The test pattern a lot,
Yeah.
too. It wasn't on the air.
A little bit, but it was so cloudy that we couldn't really see much. But we listened. We had a radio later on, and we listened to a little radio. It just everybody was in the same boat. We had big families and get together and have parties, and never stole too many melons. Once in a while, farmers would raise melons, and they'd say a row for us and a row for the kids. And so I got in one or two of those parties. We'd borrow a melon or two and have a party. My dad used to tell stories about when they'd plan for a party, and they'd go around and take a few chickens from the neighborhood and put them together and cook them, and that was their entertainment.
Sam, we've got a request from one of the audience members and you probably are the one to answer this. Imagine or remember going down the street through town that's now Mesquite Boulevard, and what were some of the businesses starting up coming down Lynch Hill before the big turn, or at the big turn?
Was a service station on the if you're coming down, it'd be on the right-hand side. It was a Texaco station, and it was kind of back in the ethel trees there, the salt cedars. And,
Is that Alvy Colton?
Alvy Colton owned that, and then his son later on, and he was, the younger Alvy was married to, I think, one of your aunts. Cousins, maybe, cousin. But anyway, that was one of the businesses. Came on down the road, and right there where that little, I think it's First North, goes across, there was a station right there. Walt Granger owned that. It was kind of a garage. Then you come down to the turn where the 90-degree turn is in town, and there was where the corner bar used to be, there was a service station owned by Jack and Mark Hardy. I think it was a Standard. And then, of course, across the street where the Soleil is now, or the abandoned, but that was Vonda's Cafe. That was a business. And then come on down there, on the same side of the street, there was a Wagon Wheel Motel, small little motel right there. Across the street was a service station that Don Lee owned later. I don't know who owned it. Wasn't there in the early days, but there was a station there later on. And then across on down from there was the corner, the Valley and Bar. That was a little store at one time. And then catty-cornered across the street was Face Cafe. Then you come on down, and when I was just a real young guy, there was a station right where Hughes's Garage used to be, where this across the street here. And then J.L. Bowler store came a little later.
And that was pretty much uptown.
That was uptown. Anything on this side of the town wash was uptown.
So when you were down on your lane wanting to come up, did you walk? Did you guys walk or bikes?
We walked.
How did you?
Rode a bike.
Did you?
I can remember coming up to a movie. My brother and I. My mother gave us $1 each, and we went to the movie. Got a pop and a sack of popcorn for 50 cents. Then after the movie, we came to Face Cafe, and we got a hamburger and a milkshake with the other 50 cents.
And so you spent your $1.
So we spent our $1 and had a great time. And up until I was, I don't know, my dad and mother bought an old car, a pickup, late 40s, and we had that. And my older brother was just barely learning to drive. And up until that time, we didn't have any kind of a car.
Really? So it was.
My uncle had a car, and if my dad needed to go to Vegas or anywhere, why, he'd hire my uncle to take him.
So did you have wagons? I mean, is that how? I mean, like, how did? Really?
Horse and wagons.
Horse and wagons.
When I was a kid, my job was to drive the team, as my dad and older brother would pitch the hay on. And I always thought that I wanted it. When I retired, I wanted a team, and so I've had several teams. Still play with horses, and my wife doesn't like it because I've broken a couple of arms and have some back problems. But anyway, that's how we traveled around. Was pretty much in the early days.
Is that how you got to church? Is that how you got to church with the team? Is that?
I can remember there were some twins over to Bunkerville, rode their horse, crossed the river and up Holtzper Lane, up the lane where we lived, and went to the movie on horseback. They were about the same age as my older brother.
So, Darlene, did you go to high school in Bunkerville?
Yes.
How big was your graduating class?
Had 18.
And you worked at high school for a few years. Do you remember how big how big are classes now?
170 maybe.
Wow.
100.
So you had 18 in your graduating class. What was school like over there in Bunkerville?
There were 3 buildings. The one is still there, the gymnasium and the shop in the back. And there was the main hall that had the auditorium and some classrooms where we had chorus and the art room and had math in there. And it had an upstairs. And then there was the west building, and that was the offices and the lunchroom. Good school, 7 through 12.
Who are your favorite teachers?
Mabel Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Hutchinson. And Mr. Cameron was a pretty good teacher. Mrs. Mitchell was a no-nonsense teacher, but we did talk her into taking us one time to hunt bottle stoppers. But it was a good school, and I think kids miss a lot nowadays because we had Sadie Hawkins Day, and we used to chase the boys and have to take them, and we'd always chase the little boys. We'd like to take the young ones. And we always went to the V. We went to the V either on horses or by wagon, and we'd cross the river and go up the hill. And
The whole school went, didn't they?
Whole school, and the 7th grade would line up where they'd have the barrels of whitewash.
They'd be down the pecking order, yeah, that have to be down.
And the seniors would be at the top, and everybody would take their own bucket, and we'd just pass it up. And that was always fun. Had some really good dances. It was fun. School was fun. I loved school.
What were school dances like?
You had one every year. You had the freshman frolic and the sophomore hop and the junior prom and the senior ball. And
did just the kids go?
Everybody went. Parents came, everybody. And that was fun. And that was one thing I could never understand, because when our kids got to be in high school, we'd say, well, we're going to go to the dance. And they'd say, no, Mom, parents don't go. And I said, yeah, Dad's a teacher. We're going to the dance.
Well, it would be grandparents and little brothers and sisters.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone went to the dance.
Because it was kind of the only thing going on in town, and it was the dance. Well, usually live music. Yeah.
It was. In fact, Ethel Levitt, usually Ethel and Dutch. And then there was the Johnson's Orchestra from, that was the father and his sons from down the valley. And nobody was ever a wallflower, because Johnson's would play 3 songs, and then they'd go plump, 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 and then you had to go change part. But anyway, yeah, it was fun. We always had ball games were always interesting.
Sam, yours was the first class, I think, because my sister was there, who graduated from the new high school over here.
We actually moved over there when we were juniors.
Juniors, okay.
We went there the first year we were juniors, and then we graduated.
And so, what was that like, making that change, that shift?
Well, we were excited because it was a new school. We had a gymnasium that had bleachers on both sides, not just one side, and a lot more room. And we had a lot of good times. In those days, the high school didn't have a football team. They would play baseball in the fall, and then play basketball in the wintertime, and then in the spring they'd have track.
What were your sports? I can remember.
Well, I played all 3 of them, but my main sport was basketball.
Well, didn't everybody need to play all of them to make up a team?
Like I said, we had about 12 boys in each class, and we had a real nice coach. We didn't win too many games, but he taught us a lot of things about life. To be honest, to work hard.
Who was it?
Wes Hughes. Wes Hughes was our coach my junior and senior year. Up until I was a senior, we went to the state tournament. We won zone every year for 5 years in a row. But we'd go to state, and we're just kind of an outback type play team, and we didn't have many plays. We just play ball and have fun, and that was the instructions that we got. But if you were a freshman and you wanted to play ball, you were a sub on the JV team. If you were a sophomore, you were on the main team. And if you were a junior, no matter what your ability was, you were usually set on the bench, and the seniors played. So when you got to be a senior, then you play. I remember we went to Panaca to play, and I was a senior, and we left in the middle of the afternoon. We went around by Alamo, and we had to take our own sack lunch in the car, and I set mine in the back. Well, all of us set them in the back window, and it kind of towards spring, and it was getting a little warm, and Roger Hunt had a beef sandwich, and I had an egg sandwich, and I didn't want to eat all my sandwich, so I traded him an egg sandwich, half of it, for his beef. Well, the beef had been sitting in the sun all afternoon, and it was getting a little ripe. So I ate that, and when we got to Panaca, I was a starter. Wes said, "You guys get out there and play ball," and I was so sick. The gymnasium was just turning around, and he says, "Go in the bathroom and stick your finger down your throat and throw up," and he said, "You'll feel better." I went in and tried that. I couldn't throw up, but boy, the room was just turning. I'd come back out, and he'd say, "Get in there," and I'd go in and play for a few minutes, and I didn't know whether I was coming or going. But anyway, we ended up winning the game, but it was a tough game.
And let's see, Roger Hunt is what now?
Out of us 12 boys, 10 or 12 boys, and they graduated that year. We have a national, he's a judge, Supreme Federal Judge. Yep. Tony Burns is head of the Ryder Corporation, done real well in his life. Joe Bowler now just got is getting his law degree. Vinnie Levitt, been a teacher and an administrator and taught school. I've been a farmer. We've had a little of everything, but
yeah, that was an amazing class.
But anyway, you know, we didn't have any computers. About all we did was learn how to read and write and do a little bit of arithmetic, and we all survived.
Now that you guys are kind of free and retired and everything, you could just be anywhere. Why are you here in Mesquite?
That's a little bit like Darlene said. We've never made enough money to leave yet.
Well, if you had, would you be somewhere else, do you think?
No, because Kenley will only stay awake one night. No, it's home. There are a few things that have changed, like, you know, what are the changes? I'd rather look across the street from my front yard and see the green fields and the hills that used to be there that I loved to be on. We spent a lot of time up on the hills above where we lived and where all the building is going right now, and we spend a lot of time in the big ditch swimming. But I'd rather see the green fields in the back of Casablanca, but not a lot I can do about that right now. But anyway, it's home, and you always want to come home.
How about you, Sam?
Well, I've traveled a little bit. I went to 4 countries last summer: Czechoslovakia, England, Hungary. Anyway, you know, Mesquite, everybody wants to get rid of the old buildings. My mother's home was made out of adobe. My dad and mother made the adobe, and they plastered inside and out. It's still standing. They didn't have any building inspectors. It's been there for 60, 70 years. And that's the way it was in Europe. Those buildings have been standing for centuries. I saw buildings that were shot at and had bullet holes in them. It was crowded. Right in Hungary alone, it's a country of about the size of the state of Nevada. I don't know how many million people live there, but it's crowded. The streets are narrow. You know, we complain a little bit about the dirt and the dust and the poor roads and a few things around town, but like Darlene said, it's always nice to come home. And just born and bred in us, I guess. We be where you're comfortable.
Well, we're real fortunate that the two of you have decided to stay, or that you're staying because you can't leave. We're real lucky to have you. Are there any questions that would like to be asked? Shirley? Yep. Yeah, there's been a lot of change now. Yeah, there's been a lot of change down that lane, and Darlene and Sam took me through there. their parents' house, and it's really great to see. It brought back a lot of very sweet memories for me, being there with my grandmother too, going and visiting. So, yeah. Oh, can gents.
Most of the grapes were Thompson seedless grapes. If you go down Grapevine Villas, the property that we used to own, I made sure that they named the streets after the different types of grapes. There's Concord, Thompson seedless, and I can't remember all the streets now, but I made sure that they named those streets after grapes that was raised there. The quality of grapes, the Thompson seedless it was a great raisin grape. And I'm sure they raised some wine grapes in the early days. They had, in fact, I had a lady ask me the other day, it came out in the paper that we were part of the family that raised grapes. Well, actually, by the time we came along, there was no longer a grape co-op down there. And she said, "Did you actually trump the grapes too for the wine?" Yes, I don't know who it was from the grape farm co-op took some grapes to the World's Fair. And I don't remember whether that was in Chicago or New York, San Francisco. Anyway, they were good quality grapes. Now, the Swiss people that came from Switzerland, they were great hands at raising grapes. My granddad, everybody in town got him to prune their grapes later on in his life. And there's an act to it. You know, you got to raise the right kind and fertilize them. My granddad, my Uncle Leonard had a project in ag to raise some grapes. And my granddad told the ag teacher, he said, "If you can find a weed in my grape vineyard and my son's grape vineyard, I'll give it to you." That's how clean they kept it in those days.
Any other questions? Well, we want to thank the two of you for sharing your memories and your thoughts about Mesquite, and I think they deserve a hand.
Right. Thank you very much. You made this very memorable. Why don't you come on down and have a seat here? We have something special for all three of you, actually. So, if you wouldn't mind. Just a few house cleaning items that I wanted to take care of. First of all, as a reminder that on Saturday, there will be a riding tour. There'll be some of the historic properties here in Mesquite. It'll be, as part of Mesquite Days, it'll be at 12 and at 1:30. And it starts from the Virgin Valley Heritage Museum on Mesquite Boulevard, 35 West Mesquite Boulevard. If you have any questions, you can call the museum. Also, for your information, for those of you who are here, not at home, there are pictures in the foyer of Mesquite then and now. That exhibit was put together by the museum, and it will also be transferred over to the museum so you can see it as part of Mesquite Days there as well. Also, I wanted to, even though Geraldine will never tell you this, I wanted to point out this painting here. It's of the Relief Society building. That's at 21 North Willow Street. This building will be open during Mesquite Days as part of it. This painting Geraldine actually did from a photograph, and I think it's fantastic. But that building will be open from 12 to 3, and it's a great symbol of some of the history here in the community. So here, a round of applause for Geraldine and her great talent. Now, there were a lot of people who helped make this evening possible, and I wanted to make sure I recognize them It would be incomplete without recognizing them. First would be the Desert Valley Times, their generosity in sharing with the prizes and also helping get the word out that there was going to be this function this evening. So thank you. And certainly to our committee, who has worked long and hard, and everyone has pulled together to help on this and other items for Mesquite Days. Very much appreciate them, especially our SA committee of Susan Bennett, David Bly, Marianne Levitt. Great thanks to them, and also to Erica Mercado, who's done a wonderful job taking care of the details this evening. So thank you. And also, I would like to thank the teachers of Beaver Dam High School and of Virgin Valley High School, and also the students. They went to great lengths, like I said, and you've seen some of them tonight. But I received about 60 essays, and I didn't receive all of them. That was only a portion. The teachers had given us kind of a short list to work from. So much thanks to them as well. So, and there's actually one right here as well. This is Noble. So let's hear a round of applause for them. And last but certainly not least, we would like to thank, we could have Sam come up and Darlene. We would like to give them this certificate of appreciation as a memento of their time here this evening with us. We certainly appreciate you sharing your memories. I don't think I could walk from Santa Clara to the mill with a 100-pound bag on my shoulders, even if my life depended on it. But this is to both of you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we would be amiss if we didn't recognize Geraldine Zarate, our moderator this evening. Thank you, Geraldine. And just as a few reminders, so everyone is aware, this and past Founders Forums will be available for viewing at the museum. They are open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4. You can go in and see this or any other, or they also have some very interesting movies over there of different things, and also some great exhibits. So take the time, if not this weekend during Mesquite Days, some other time to go over there and see what they have. And for those of you here tonight, there are refreshments in the foyer, so enjoy. Thank you and good night.